Hello and welcome to Simply Balanced, the podcast where we dive into, well, all things balanced. I'm your host, Taylor Grosso, a registered dietitian with a passion to helping you find your unique Balance Girl aesthetic in this often hectic world. Each episode will explore different facets of living a balanced life, whether it's unraveling the latest nutrition trends, discovering mindful eating strategies, or discussing tips for a balanced lifestyle that fits your routine. Balance isn't about perfection, it's about making choices that feel right for you, nurturing your body and mind, and enjoying life's simple pleasures. So whether you're sipping your morning coffee, heading out for a walk, or winding down for the evening, I'm thrilled to have you join me. So let's dive in and talk, well, all things balanced. Hello, besties, and welcome back to another episode of Simply Balanced. As always, thank you so much for being here. I just want to start off by saying that I am nursing a head cold, so I might sound a little bit stuffy, and we might have some coughing fits during this podcast episode. But luckily, I have my good friend Austin to edit those out in case they happen. But today we have Zack back on the podcast, my husband. His episode it was one of the very first episodes that we did, is still one of my top episodes, so I think we sound pretty good together on a podcast. But we're actually going to be talking through Zach's type 1 diabetes diagnosis, kind of the impacts that it's had on his mental health, what it has kind of been like to go through that, especially in the first year of marriage, because it's a big life adjustment. And then also the ways he's had to shift his lifestyle because of type 1 diabetes. And of course, I talk a lot about blood sugar balance on my page. So who better to talk about blood sugar balance than my type 1 diabetic husband? So let's dive right on in. Hi, Zach, and welcome back to Simply Balanced.
Hey, thanks for having me. I think for the record, we just want to state that I'm the only repeat guest so far.
So far, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you're probably going to be one of the few repeat guests because you do live in my house, which makes it a little easier for us to record together.
Whose house?
Okay, here we go.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's not get sidetracked.
Let's not get sidetracked. I was going to say, because we could tell that story if you want me to.
We can tell the story.
Essentially, I did not have a job when we moved to Des Moines because I was not quite working for myself, but I also was not quite employed. So Zachary is the only one on the loan. So whenever I say, it's our house, he's like, whose house is it?
No, you didn't even say our house. You said my house.
Well, who runs the house, though?
Luigi.
Think before you answer. I mean, that's a fair statement. Luigi does run the house. Yes. If you don't know who Luigi is, Luigi's our dog. He's our firstborn dog.
I would hope you didn't think that we named our child Luigi.
I mean, potentially. I think people know we don't have a child, unless this is their first time listening.
Well, and we are going to name our child Mario, so.
We are not going to name our child Mario. We do have Italian names picked out, but it's not Mario.
Okay. All right.
Anyways, let's get into diabetes. So how long ago you literally just said how long ago it was that you got diagnosed?
It was 11 months and 1 day ago. So June 26th of 2023.
So you probably presented with signs and symptoms for, what would you say, 4 or 5-ish months? I'd say February.
I was going to say, I vividly remember February. The first thing the biggest sign to me was I think I would get up and go to the bathroom 3 or 4 times a night.
So one of the main signs and symptoms of type 1 diabetes is excessive urination. So your body is basically just trying to get rid of all the extra glucose that's floating around in your bloodstream. So it's going to cause you to go to the bathroom a lot more. And I can remember in February, Zach wasn't really presenting with any other signs and symptoms at that time because you hadn't started losing weight. And so we were I jokingly had said to him one time, because he was like, I can't stop going to the bathroom in the middle of the night. I was like, maybe you have diabetes, totally joking with him because there was no way he had type 2 diabetes. We knew that. And also, like I said in the beginning of the intro, that type 1 diabetes is typically not diagnosed in adulthood. I should have looked up the percentage beforehand, but it's known as juvenile,
Whatever.
However you say it, diabetes for a reason, because most commonly kids will present with the symptoms at a pretty early age. And with kids, the diagnosis is also super rapid. A kiddo will go into ketoacidosis is what it's called, which basically just means your blood sugar gets way, 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 way too high, and it can actually put you into a coma. It's quite scary. But the good thing is now our children have a fairly low risk because Zach has no family history of it. I think our kiddos have a 13% chance of having it. But if they were to have it, we know all of the signs and symptoms of it now.
Yeah. So, and going back to signs and symptoms, I think that the constant urination was sign number 1. And then the other signs didn't really present themselves, I would say, until around April. And then,
right when we moved back.
Well, and even when we lived in Colorado, still, I remember just for some reason, I could never drink enough water to not feel thirsty. It was always thirsty. I remember getting up in the middle of the night multiple times, going downstairs and chugging orange juice, chugging chocolate milk, chugging applesauce straight out of the jar. Like, I just could never get satisfied. It was amazing. So that was a sign number 2. And then sign number 3, which you noticed first, and then my dad did too, was just like I was losing weight. But at that time too, I was also trying to lose weight, so I thought I was just doing a really, really good job. And then we kind of transitioned to like realizing, well, I'm eating probably close to 4,000, 5,000 calories in a day.
It got to the point where you were doing a cut, like food-wise, for a little bit.
Yeah.
Where you were like trying to cut.
And more cardio.
And so at first we were like, oh, it's just really working.
Yeah.
And so then it got to the point though where you had started to lose enough weight that you were like, all right, I don't want to lose anymore. Like, I feel like I'm losing muscle now.
Yeah. And like I said, I was eating probably close to 4,000 calories a day, if not more. And
I just wanted them to know that was like after you had lost weight though. Then we started like pumping you with calories. Like, I don't condone mass gainer shakes, but like Zach was drinking a mass gainer shake every night. He was drinking like 2 to 3 gallons of chocolate milk on a weekly basis.
Not 3, 2.
2 gallons of chocolate milk on a weekly basis, would just like chug it straight out of the jar. Like, I was feeding this man more calories than possible, but he could not keep on weight. And that's also very like uncharacteristic for your body.
Right.
Like, that was the other thing too, is like you've done like cuts and stuff in the past and you've lost weight from doing cuts, but it's not like you never lost like that much weight, because in the end,
I literally had friends like telling me I look like crackhead skinny. Like, they're like joking.
I'll put a picture in the show notes of the difference.
Like, jokingly, like, was like, hey, like, you're not doing like meth, are you? Because like people were like, damn, you look skinny. Like, you lost a lot of weight. Like, I remember going to a bachelor party in May, and they're like, you look good. Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, hey man, just more cardio. I'm still eating like all I want and eating crappy, really. But so that was the kind of the third and final sign, I would say. There weren't really other symptoms that really stood out to me, I don't think.
No, excessive thirst, excessive urination, and then the weight loss.
Well, the sweating thing.
Oh, yeah. So Zach kept thinking he was having like panic attacks. Like, it was at work or when he was out.
And like, to be fair, is like, when I do have like panic or anxiety attacks, like, it is excessive sweating that kind of happens for me.
Yeah.
But like, this was kind of a different level of like, it was happening constantly. And I was like, and then we had just moved back, so I was like, okay, maybe I'm just like having a hard time adjusting and moving back to Iowa, all that kind of stuff. And then we kind of realized that it was, what's it called again?
So hyperglycemic attacks.
Hyperglycemia attacks. So basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, what I was doing was just eating my breakfast at work is when this would happen. And obviously, my body has no way of regulating the blood sugar, and my insulin isn't getting back into my bloodstream because my pancreas isn't working. So my blood sugar was probably spiking into the 400 or 500s if I had to guess.
I'd guess higher than that.
Yeah, and so basically my body's response was just like, one of the symptoms of hyperglycemia is just like excessive sweating. And I legit got to the point where I was at my desk just like dripping down my face. And I would go to the bathroom because that was like the coldest part at work. Yeah. And I still could not like stop sweating, and I was like panicking.
No, I remember it was probably like 2 weeks before you got diagnosed when you called me in the bathroom and you were like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I think I need to go back to my psychiatrist because like I said, you thought it was like frequent panic attacks because it was happening so often. And you're like, I don't get why this is happening. Like, I know that we moved and it's a big life change, but I don't feel like this anxious to be having this many panic attacks all the time. And so at that point I was like, okay, I think you need to at least schedule a physical and like maybe reschedule with your psychiatrist, get back on like, because you weren't on your anti-anxiety meds at that time, were you?
Oh, I hadn't been on my anti-anxiety meds for a couple of years.
Yeah, but that's where, because they were so frequent, we were like, okay, well, maybe you just need to go back on those. Like, maybe that'll help. It's just a big move transition. But then me and your dad were like, you really need to schedule a physical, like, especially with the weight loss.
The weight loss. And the what really drove me too was just like, well, I hadn't actually been to a doctor or PCP probably since like high school.
Can I just say that I was not happy about that? I don't know why men don't like to go to the doctor. Go to the doctor.
Well, it's because leading up to that, it's like I always felt fine. Like there was nothing wrong.
It doesn't
with
matter
me.
if you feel fine. You gotta get the inside checked out.
And I will say now, I was like, yes, gentlemen, go to the doctor.
Yes.
Just at least once a year. Just go once a year.
Do your yearly physical, at least.
Because that, to me, actually possibly saved my life. Like, if we're being real.
Yeah, no, it did. Me forcing you to go to the doctor.
Going back to the signs and symptoms, because then the next step was, okay, we scheduled a PCP, and so I went and talked to my PCP, and he was just like, I was telling him about all these signs and symptoms I have, and he's like, and he just tells me, he's like, so like, first thing you think about when you hear those symptoms, he's like, and I was like, diabetes. He's like, yep, absolutely. And he's like, explaining that it's very rare for someone at my age to be diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And he's like, honestly, there could be a couple of reasons why you're losing weight and not keeping it on and have all these other things going on. He's like, it could be, well, at that point too, I just went back on my anti-anxiety meds because I thought that was the cause for all of this. So he's like, well, one thing that could be a side effect of those, like those side effects may not have shown themselves when you were taking them a few years ago, but now they could, I guess, come into play and present themselves at, kind of like a later, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but just at a later date.
Well, and especially when you've been off of them for a while and then you reintroduce them, because like when I took Lexapro for that short time, I mean, it negatively impacted my appetite so much. Yeah. And I lost like quite a bit of weight when I first started. Yes, there can be delayed effects and also just like new effects when your body hasn't taken it for a while and then you start taking it again.
Yeah. So he was just explaining that. He's like, honestly, that could be the case. And then he was like, honestly, another thing too is like your metabolism could have just like really kicked in or something. And I was like, yeah, maybe. And I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds good because I don't want to have diabetes. That works. So he's like, what we'll do is like, we'll just have you come in tomorrow, like just fast and we'll do some blood tests and that was like on a Thursday or Friday, so it was going to take the weekend to get back to me. And so fasted, went and got the blood tests, and then I think he called me on Monday.
No, he called you like the day you did the blood test. Because I remember...
Oh, no, the blood test was on Monday.
Because I remember you calling me at lunch, and you were like... The way that you sounded when you called me, I was like, oh God, he has cancer. Like, that was my first thought. I like thought he had cancer. I thought something like, not that type 1 diabetes is not a life-altering diagnosis, but like, he's not dying right now, which is like, I was so concerned that you had something way worse going on because there is like, you can lose excessive weight when it comes to different types of cancers. A lot of like the signs and symptoms, I was like, oh God, there's something way worse going on. Like, why would they call him back already?
Yep.
So in my mind, I was like, and especially the way you like said hello when you called me, I was like, oh no, like what did they say?
Yeah, well, and so he read me my my fasting glucose levels, which was in the 600s.
No, they were in the 400s, and then they were in the 600s when you got Culver's that night after your diagnosis.
Yeah. So for and then maybe you want to touch on what a normal like
I was gonna say
fasting blood sugar looks like.
I feel like I should explain type 1 diabetes too a little bit. So you guys have probably heard of type 1 and type 2 diabetes, but the one that you more commonly have heard about is type 2 diabetes. That's the most common one. Type 1 diabetes, so the one that Zack has, is considered an autoimmune condition. Essentially, his pancreas just stopped working. So how it actually works, I've talked about this a lot when it comes to blood sugar balance, but when we eat a carbohydrate, it breaks down into glucose. Glucose then enters our bloodstream. When that glucose hits the bloodstream, it signals the pancreas to release insulin. Insulin will then go and capture the glucose and take it to the cells that it needs to go to. So you think about if your pancreas just stops working and is not shuttling out any sort of insulin anymore, your blood sugar really has nowhere to go. Your blood sugar is just going to stay floating in your bloodstream. And the reason that we can be scared about these high blood sugar counts is because they can affect a variety of different things in the body. They can cause neuropathy, so they can cause you to lose sensation in like your fingers and your toes and your extremities. That's why you might know of people with type 2 diabetes who have very, very high blood sugars and maybe not well managed, and they lose fingers or they get sorts of like what am I thinking of in their feet? Literally have like holes in their feet essentially, and they can't necessarily feel it. It can also really negatively impact your kidneys. That's why we see so much urine coming out as well when you're struggling with diabetes. It can affect a variety of different organs and tissues in your body. Eyesight is one. Like Zach really struggled with his eyesight right after diagnosis because of his high circulating blood sugar levels. So that's essentially what happens in type 1 diabetes, is just that your pancreas stops working. So Zach is dependent on insulin, exogenous insulin. So he has to inject it himself or inject it into a pod that he wears. And then that pod kind of works as a pancreas. He'll go into his phone, he'll enter the amount of carbohydrates that he ate, and then it will sputter out the amount of insulin that he needs in order to kind of like cover that blood sugar, essentially. But the really like scary thing was Zach's A1C. So when you go to the doctor and you're getting diagnosed with whether it's prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes, there's two labs that they're going to look at. They're going to look at your A1C and they're going to look at that fasting glucose that Zach just mentioned. So a fasting glucose means that you haven't had any food. Usually you go right away in the morning. So, you're 8, 9, 10 hours fasted. You haven't had any sort of food in your system. They're going to look at what your blood sugar is at that moment, because your blood sugar should be fairly low. For like an average individual, a 70 to 100 is a pretty good like fasting blood sugar. 70 to 90 is kind of like that optimal range, but you don't really necessarily want to go past that like 110 mark in the fasting blood sugar range. And then your A1C is going to be a rounded number. So what we're looking at it with A1C is that because that fasting glucose is only a snapshot in time, and like sometimes different things can affect that and cause it to be high or low. So we want to look at that A1C because that's a 3-month measure of your average blood sugar level. So it kind of takes into account a ratio. So for example, Zach's was unmeasurable. It was above 14, which is not good. If anybody knows anything about A1C, 14 is not good.
What's the scale?
The scale, you want to be under, I believe if I remember correctly, you want to be under a 5.7 in order to be considered normal.
Yeah, but what's the range is what I'm saying.
Well, 14 is the highest.
Correct. Yeah.
And then typically people are anywhere in between like 5 and 5.7. Is like a pretty normal range. I'm trying to remember like what that upper range is, and I believe it's 5. If you're above 5.7, you're considered pre-diabetic. I just haven't looked at those like notes on my labs in a long time. But so Zach was like very, very, very high.
I broke the scale.
Greater than 14, which I had only seen that a couple of times, like when I was working in the hospitals and in the clinics and all of those types of things. And the reason for that was obviously that he had for so long been circulating high blood sugar levels, probably since February, and you got diagnosed in June. So that's a long time for his blood sugar to be that high, which is why his A1C was so high. Now, the reason that he was losing such a significant amount of weight is because, remember, the purpose of insulin is to go and capture the glucose and get it into the cell where it needs to go. So that's for energy. That's for energy storage, so weight gain. And that's also for glycogen storage or energy for later use. And so if it can't get into your cell, essentially what your body is going to start doing is it has no glycogen stores to tap into for energy use. And Zach was still working out pretty normally during this whole time. Like, you didn't cut back on your workout routine at all because you didn't really realize how shitty you felt until after your diagnosis and after you got insulin.
Right. I will say it was something where it's like after I got diagnosed, I kind of looked back and I was like, yeah, some of my workouts, I was like very, very fatigued and low energy, but I was like, okay, maybe it's just we moved back to Iowa, it's more humid, and that's just affecting me.
Yeah, when we were also doing like more intense workouts at that time, I would say.
Yeah,
like we had started doing
yeah.
conditioning workouts together, which neither of us had done in a long time.
Right.
So we were like, oh, it must just be like the climate.
But I mean, I remember just strictly doing like one of my own workouts and just doing deadlifts, and like I was like decreasing in weight because I was like, I can't do this anymore. I don't know what was going on.
Well, so that's what will happen is if you have this high circulating blood sugar and you don't have any insulin to get it into the cell, your body's going to have to start pulling from your fat storage in order to provide your body with energy. So that's where ketoacidosis comes in, right? Where we're pulling we have our blood sugar levels extremely high. We're pulling fat from a majority of our energy storage and usage because Zach went from around 190 to 160. So he he lost about 30 pounds in the process of this because he was working out still the same. He was still moving his body in a variety of ways. And so his body still needed energy, but it was having to pull so much energy from his fat storage because even though he had so much glucose circulating, it wasn't getting into the cells. So his body was just expending any excess energy that it had. So that's the difference between type 1 and type 2 in the sense of with type 2 diabetes, it's really coming from a lifestyle standpoint. So type 2, there is a genetic component as well. So you're more predisposed if you have a family history of type 2 diabetes. And a lot of people will try to say that type 2 diabetes comes from eating too much sugar. That's actually very inaccurate. It has to do with an imbalance in your blood sugar levels for a very long time. So when we see these constant ups and downs, which in technically you could say that's coming from eating sugar, because if you're eating more simple sugars, you are going to get more significant spikes and more significant falls. But most of the time that's coming from the fact that people don't necessarily understand this blood sugar balance and how to balance out carbohydrates. But the biggest thing there is you can make a lifestyle shift with type 2 diabetes, meaning that you can create more balanced plates, more power pack snacks, balance out that blood sugar levels. Lifestyle is going to be a huge one. We're going to talk a little bit about how like muscle really helps when it comes to diabetes. And so if you make those lifestyle shifts with type 2 diabetes, you can fully reverse it, or you can just be on a medication like metformin, for example, that can mitigate it for you. So that's what the biggest difference is that type 1 is that autoimmune condition. Zach will be reliant on insulin for the rest of his life. When it comes to type 2, it is reversible, and it is something that you can kind of, I don't know if get rid of is the right word, but like you could get out of having type 2 diabetes essentially. So that was the biggest like definition of the two things. But then something else that we kind of wanted to talk about was the mental health behind the diagnosis I wanted to honestly talk about both of us, because I know that obviously it impacted your life greater than it impacted mine, because your entire life shifted and has shifted since then because of all of the things that you have to do now. But I also think that if you're someone out there who has a partner who has an autoimmune condition or has some sort of chronic health condition, you know this as well as I do, that it does impact your partner's mental health a lot. So I'll let you kind of talk on that first.
Yeah, so I guess picking back up where we left off as far as getting diagnosed, and when I called you, I probably sounded very, like, shocked.
I was going to say, you just sounded like you were in shock more than anything.
Well, because I, probably like most people who aren't around diabetes individuals, is like, I have no idea what that means.
Yeah.
I have no clue. I just know I associated with the word diabetes with bad.
Yeah.
That's all I knew. I didn't know how my lifestyle was going to change. I didn't know how serious of a condition it was. So I was down in the dumps those first few days, and honestly, probably that first month or two. But obviously very blessed to be married to a dietitian who knows how to handle these things and explain these things to me. And who has a very good education and background around it, even though it's not necessarily your specialty or anything.
I would consider it my specialty now.
Yeah, I mean, you're an expert now, and I'm learning. I've learned so much about it the past year. But I think it was obviously a huge adjustment for me. I mean, luckily, we already had a lot of lifestyle, I guess,
you were already eating pretty well balanced, and you were already working out.
Yeah, my lifestyle already lined up a lot with what you kind of need to do to live the best life you can with type 1 diabetes, I guess. So yes, obviously I was constantly working out. I'm eating healthy, balanced, whatever you want to call it. I'm married to a dietitian, so that helps. And then I think one key thing, thank God this didn't happen years ago, was just we decided to really evaluate our relationship like alcohol, like we've talked about in the past. And I wasn't constantly drinking, because that is one thing for me that I've noticed that can really mess with my blood sugar levels. And it's obviously not good for your body. So it's not going to be good for your type 1 diabetes as well. So luckily in that aspect, that wasn't a huge lifestyle change. The biggest thing for me that was just kind of shocking. And then a big adjustment was just like, obviously now I have to carry around insulin with me wherever I go. I have to wear a glucometer to always track my blood sugar levels, and that like makes me have to pay attention all the time. Kind of gives you like a little bit of anxiety around like, okay, what should I be eating? What can I be eating? Like, I will say, like, I don't eat nearly as much as I used to. Like, I used to overindulge all the time because just like I didn't have to worry about it. And I'm like, I'm still young. Like, I work out. I'm fine. It doesn't matter to me. But now I'm very like cognizant of like over snacking, overeating. Especially one thing I think about all the time is like when we get like donuts or something. It's like I have one donut now instead of like 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well,
and you pair it with protein, fat, or fiber.
Yeah. And the reason I do that is because, you know, as long as I'm taking enough insulin and matching the insulin to my carb ratio that I'm eating, I can eat fine and balance my blood sugar levels. It's just much harder for me to do it once I'm eating more carbs, more sugar. And it gets kind of exhausting to like have to deal with that a little bit mentally. And I'm sure a lot of people that do have type 1 or type 2 diabetes can relate to that.
Yeah.
But I think another thing too, that like when we were kind of researching type 1 diabetes early on when I got diagnosed, was like one of the things too was like, well, type 1 diabetics, you know, depending on how you live your life and, you know, keep a balanced blood sugar, it's like one thing that they see, or I guess people see, is like shorter lifespans typically than the average American. So like I remember reading that and like really, really being like, shit.
This kid read it and goes, should we have a baby? I was like, let's sleep on that, because this was like over a year ago where we had definitely talked about that more recently, but a year ago I was nowhere near ready for a child.
I was seriously reevaluating. I was like, is this the job I want to have? And since changed jobs, but like, what do I really want out of life now? Because it definitely shifted my perspective of like, okay, like what's important to me. I kind of need to start living my life. Like, not that I was living my life for other people, but like I'm a people pleaser. Like that's just how it is. And so it kind of shifted my perspective a little bit and kind of hit me. But like I said too, or not like I said, but one thing that stuck with me is just like, as long as I'm doing a good job of like taking care of my body, my blood sugar, my diet, all that kind of stuff, is like, I am confident I'll be able to live a pretty good and long life. And obviously you'll go into the whole thing with muscle and whatnot and explain that. So that should help too. But I will say that, like, going back to what I said about the insulin thing, is like, honestly, like for someone who lived 26 years of their life never having to bring exogenous insulin with them everywhere they go for when they eat, or bring candy with them for when they might have lows, it's like, it's kind of an adjustment. It's kind of, honestly, it's like, it feels a bit embarrassing, even though it's out of my control.
Yeah.
And I've talked with someone else who has a friend who has type 1 diabetes and has had it their whole life. And they still get embarrassed that like, oh, I got to take my insulin, or, oh, hey, I can't drink like you guys do. Can't really go out like you guys do. Can't eat like you guys do. So it's an adjustment, and no, it shouldn't be embarrassing, and I know that, but like I still get embarrassed by it sometimes, because like, you know, if my pod goes off after I'm done giving myself insulin, it gets embarrassing, because then someone's like, oh, hey, what's that, and then they start asking more questions. I'm like, I not to say I don't mind like informing my friends about it, because like I know the reason they're asking questions about it is because they genuinely care, but then it's just like explaining all of this, and it's just like, to me, it's a bit embarrassing, and I don't love talking about it all the time. But I understand that people want to know, because if I was them, like I didn't know anything about it before I had it, so I totally understand it. But mental health wise, it's been a big adjustment. The past year has been a learning curve. Not to say that it's like totally messed up my mental health, but I do have days where it's like I look back and was like thankful for when I didn't have it, and not having to worry about all these different factors in my life now. So some days I can get kind of like sulky about it, but for the most part, I feel like I have a pretty good attitude. And I think one thing that helps with that is, you know, when I first got diagnosed, I was kind of telling some of my friends and like reaching out to them just to like inform them, so they didn't just like find out randomly through other people. And I feel like that's important to tell your loved ones, like, about your life, I guess. So like when we talked to my buddy Laz, he was like, because I was like trying to keep a positive attitude and like just kind of hide some of like the pain associated with it, I guess.
Yeah.
And then he said something of like, hey, it's okay to be like upset about it. And so like recognizing that I can have a positive attitude, but still feel those real emotions that I do have has been super helpful in the process too.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, two things that I want to touch on from that are, well, one, like what I've kind of, I guess, went through with it too, but then also going back to one of the things that you said about, you know, not eating as much carbs or not snacking as much or not overindulging as much. I think a big misconception, because you also said, I can eat as many carbs as I want as long as I take insulin to match it. I think a big misconception for type 1 and type 2 diabetics is that you can't have carbs.
Right.
Because what I noticed when we went and talked with Zach's diabetes educator, which like, I have no like disrespect towards diabetes educators. Like they know so much. But I also think like she basically just taught you how to carb count. Like was basically like this food has X grams of carbs. This is how many units of insulin you need for that many grams of carbs. But the reality is that even someone with type 1 diabetes, the type of carb is going to affect your blood sugar differently. And we've seen that directly. Like I don't want to say that I like Zach's disease by any means, but it is interesting from a dietitian perspective to watch how different foods affect his blood sugar, because it really proves the science of blood sugar balance and how it impacts your body in different ways. So like if Zach were to eat a donut by itself, his blood sugar is going to spike pretty rapidly and pretty quickly, versus when he eats a donut with protein, fat, and or fiber, it's not going to spike nearly as much. Or when you eat a piece of whole wheat toast versus a donut, that's, even though they're both carbohydrates, they both break down into sugar, they affect his blood sugar in a different manner. And that goes for people without diabetes as well. So I think that what I see on social media a lot is that when I post about Zach eating carbohydrate-based snacks or carbohydrate, I didn't know diabetics could eat carbs. Like, can he have carbs? And I'm like, yeah, he can have carbs. A type 1 diabetic can have carbs. A type 2 diabetic can have carbs. It's just a matter of, one, learning how to balance out your carbohydrates and learning the difference between those simple and more complex carbohydrates. So those more complex carbohydrates are going to be things like your whole grains, your fruits, your vegetables, beans, legumes, those types of things. And then your more simple carbs are the ones that we think of, I think, most often when it comes to carbs, which are things like fruit juice or soda or candy, pastries, cake, those things that are those more simple carbohydrates. And so, and I think another like interesting thing that I hear a lot, I'll actually have a lot of people reach out to me who are like struggling with their husbands or boyfriends or partners having low blood sugars. And they're like, what do you do to handle like your husband's lows? And I'm like, you've had maybe 4 like big lows in the time that you've had your type 1 diagnosis, and most of them have been because of overshooting yourself. Like,
correct.
None of them have been from you not eating.
Right.
And I think part of that is, one, having me as a wife to help you balance out your plates and your snacks. And I think you've gotten a lot better at doing that on your own because you haven't had a choice. Like, we've had to kind of learn those things together. But I also think that like you don't have a lot of lows because you eat so consistently throughout the course of the day, which not a lot of people do. But I don't think that's their fault. But that's why I'm saying when you go to a diabetes educator, like the only thing she really went over with Zach was explaining the process of it and then being like, okay, here's how you carb count. It's not teaching you how to build balance plates or power pack snacks or all of these things that I was able to educate Zach on. And I get it. Like, you're seeing, those diabetes educators are probably seeing how many freaking patients in a day. They don't have time to sit down with you.
In and out.
They don't have time to sit down with you and go through all of those things. Like, they're just following their protocol. But I think that's why, you know, I've had type 1 diabetics reach out to me and be like, I've learned more from your TikTok than I have like ever going to my endocrinologist, which once again, it's also like, if you weren't married to me, you wouldn't know the questions to ask your endo either. Like, I went to a lot of Zach's initial appointments with him just because I knew the different things to ask the diabetes educator about, to ask the endo about. And then like I would ask them and then I would just explain it to you.
I would be so screwed if I wasn't married to a dietitian.
Like, we went to his PCP appointment the day after he got diagnosed, and me and his PCP were just going back and forth about Novolog and Basaglar, which are like the two types of insulin, and about his A1C. And Zach's just sitting in between us, like looking back and forth and like, what the fuck is going on? But I was like, just let me ask all my questions and then I'll explain it to you, because that's another.
You ask the questions and then explain it to me like I'm 5.
Well, because that's the thing, is doctors don't.
Right.
Like and once again, there are probably some really great doctors out there who do explain it like you're 5, but I think also being an adult getting diagnosed makes it a little bit more challenging, because a doctor will just, and especially like your PCP was not specialized in this either. And he was very upfront with us about that. He's like, I'm just going to get you into an endo because like, I don't know. And I remember when we went and picked up your insulin that very first night, I was like, how much do I give you? Like there was just like not a whole lot of information that they had really given us. So that's kind of like what I wanted to say in terms of the misconceptions that I hear a lot when it comes to type 1 diabetes and type 2. But in terms of like how it's impacted my mental health, I think something that I don't know if it's been a struggle necessarily, but we've kind of gotten into like tiffs about it before, is just that I have a really hard time letting go of control around anything. And especially like something that I know so much about. At first, it was really hard for me to trust that you were doing it right. And that's like I said, a control thing out of me. I think I just go into like mom mode immediately. Like I've explained this to Zach, and maybe girls who are listening to this, whether you have a partner or whether you have kids, I feel this like very maternal energy when you're sick. Like when Zach is sick, because I don't have any kids yet, and I'm sure this is what you feel like with kids too, I don't feel sick, but it makes me like hurt physically. Like I don't like seeing him sick. It makes me so sad and like anxious to see someone I love so much like hurt or not feel good. And so in the beginning, that was really hard for me. And you were also like, Zach's usually the more positive one, I would say, of our relationship. And so especially that first month when you really were like more depressed and kind of down in the dumps, I felt like I had to really be positive and be like, okay, we can do this. Like, and here's how we're going to do this. And I just went into full blown mom mode. Like, I'm going to figure everything out for you. We're going to make this work. Here's how much insulin you need. Here's how many carbs you have, and was just full teacher mode. And I think like as time went on, the only time that we got like frustrated with each other was just that I had to explain to Zach how much like it does impact me for him to have this condition, because I get that it hasn't really changed my daily life. I don't have to give myself insulin shots. I don't have to manage carbs every day. I don't have to change my lifestyle, but I have to watch the person that I love more than anything in the world do all of those things. And that has been challenging to a certain extent. And like Zach said, there was also this aspect of, we learned that his lifespan could be shorter. And so Zach went on his first bachelor party, like kind of his first time drinking. So drinking really plummets Zach's blood sugar. And part of that is the fact that he just has so much muscle, because essentially when you have a lot of muscle, your body has more capacity to take up more glycogen or more glucose. So that's why if you have PCOS, if you have insulin resistance, if you have type 2 diabetes, if you have prediabetes, if you have type 1 diabetes, anything where your blood sugar is impacted, it's recommended to do resistance training, because then your muscle tissue has a lot more capacity to essentially soak up that glucose out of your bloodstream. And it's easier for your blood sugar to drop more rapidly, because that blood sugar has somewhere to go, rather than just your liver or your brain, or essentially then it goes to like excess fat tissue to be stored for later use. So muscle is a fantastic thing to have when it comes to, yeah, Zach's showing his leg muscle right now, which he's gained a lot of since.
And if you want to see it, go check out the YouTube channel.
Zach's my YouTube connoisseur. He does all my YouTube videos for me. But that's essentially why resistance training and gaining muscle is recommended from all of those things. But besides that, like I was saying, Zach, when he drinks, it just drops his blood sugar pretty rapidly. And part of that is because he has more muscle. Part of that.
Initially, when the first few times I was drinking after diagnosis, that's what we were seeing.
Correct. But it's still, to this day, you have to eat carbs while you're drinking in order to keep your blood sugar at a pretty steady level.
Yeah, while I'm drinking, I got to eat carbs and then just not hammer alcohol. You just got to take it easy.
Yeah.
Or not take it easy, but take it slow.
But one of the hardest parts for me has been like when I'm not with Zach when he's drinking or when he's out, I do get a little panicky.
Which is not often.
But you went on your first bachelor party without me since your diagnosis.
Oh, I went to bachelor parties with you before?
No. Yeah. But like the first trip you took without me was a couple months ago, and I had quite a few panic attacks while you were gone because even though I have the app to see his blood sugar, and I talked about this a lot in therapy because I have this like control thing. I think I just got nervous that Zach can sometimes, I'm sure other girls can relate to this, when he gets around the boys, he just wants to be like a little frat boy in college again.
Shout out to my boys.
And I got nervous that he was going to overdo it. His blood sugar was going to drop. None of the boys would know what to do and all of the different things, right? And so I just was very anxious, but he's went out a couple times since then, and every time has monitored his blood sugar very closely, takes carbohydrates, takes sugar with him, does a really good job of managing it. And I told you this the other day that like I feel a lot better about it now. I just needed you to do it a couple times for me to feel comfortable with it.
Well, and I think another thing, just as a side note too, that helps with that is the fact that like when I drink now, I'm not like trying to black out or anything. It's like I can find a good level of like buzz, drunk, and then I'm not going over that.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, the other thing I was going to say about this whole thing is so Zach's heart can also be impacted more significantly than someone who doesn't have type 1 diabetes. And like the week after Zach got diagnosed, some girl that I've never followed before popped up on my For You page, and it was like a tribute to her. Like on her page from her mom had written it. She had type 1 diabetes. She had went out drinking with her friends. The drinking had plummeted her blood sugar, and her friends didn't know. They thought she just had went to bed, and she had went into cardiac arrest while she was asleep. And so ever since then, my brain, being a brain that goes to worst case scenario, every time Zach drinks, I am convinced that he's going to go into cardiac arrest. So I think, like we said, the fact that he changed his drinking habits far before he got diagnosed and also has the great lifestyle habits that you have now has made a big difference. But I think that you're also at an age where you're very responsible with it too. Like if you would have gotten diagnosed with this when you were like 20.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, God bless this wasn't 5 years ago when I was still raging, basically. Because
I also think you would have just been like, fuck it. Like
that's the thing is like I don't know that I would have been able to adjust my lifestyle.
Yeah. And well, no, we were together 5 years ago. I probably would have whipped you into shape. But
you know what? I could have seen that creating a lot of
at that time, yes, because we weren't
bad arguments.
We weren't mature enough yet to handle that.
No, that I mean, you know, and I'm obviously a big believer that everything happens for a reason. So like obviously it happened I'm not going to say at the right time because I don't think ever was the right time, but it's better now than 5 years ago, like you said.
Yeah, 100%. And so, yeah, I think that that's how it's really impacted my mental health mostly is just when Zach's more so away, I get nervous. But I think what's also helped too is that a lot of your friends are also very understanding of it as well. Like your friends have all been incredibly supportive. And even though like you don't drink as much as them, you still go out with them. Like they know that you can't get drunk like them because of diabetes and no one's pushing you to do that. And I respect them a lot for that. And I also think that if something did happen to you, pretty much every group of friends that you have, there's a handful of guys in there who would jump into action right away and like help you or take care of you.
Yeah, no, I mean, all of my friends would take care of me if something happened.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm never worried about that.
I just was because I'm like, boys just don't know, like, especially if they've never been around type 1 diabetes before. It's like they just wouldn't know any different. But I think another thing we've talked about, Zach has this thing where if his blood sugar drops too rapidly and we can't get enough sugar into him, you got to push it up his nose. to basically if he goes unconscious, which can happen if your blood sugar drops too low. So that's another thing we've like talked about to kind of help with that is you tell like 1 or 2 friends when you're on these trips, like, hey, if something were to happen, like this is the thing, this is how you use it. And that also puts my mind at ease too, because I think that's my biggest thing is that if you were to go super low, that people just wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that like it definitely does impact a partner as well to have a partner that has some sort of autoimmune condition, but to the extent it doesn't affect me as much as it affects Zach. And I've told him this 1,000 times. I wish more than anything I could just take it away from him and put it on me because I would rather do it than have him do it. But unfortunately,
no, thank you.
That's something I can't do. No. But I would take it from you if I had the
it.
ability to do so.
Anyway.
But I would take it. But
what else are we talking about?
The last thing that we're going to talk about, because we're already at 43 minutes, is just some of the snacks and meals that you eat, because a lot of people ask me about that a lot. So I think that would be something interesting that the people would like to hear.
Yeah, I mean, that obviously helps me a lot with the way I manage my blood sugar and my type 1 diabetes is just knowing or having a pretty consistent routine as far as eating the same things or same kinds of things every day, because when you do that, you really, really get a good feel for how that affects your blood sugar every day. So you already know how it's going to affect it before it even happens, so you can take the right steps and the right amount of insulin beforehand, or sometimes in my case, no insulin at all, because I know that certain levels of carbohydrates paired with this and that isn't going to affect my blood sugar as much. Sometimes it also kind of depends on whether or not I'm wearing a pod or if I'm shooting myself with a needle. Just kind of depends. But as far as like my diet and snacks go, I'm always, at least throughout the week, always pairing my carbohydrates with, like you said, protein, fats, fiber, like
except for before a workout.
So
that's the other interesting thing about type 1 diabetes is that when Zach exercises or when he walks, actually that happens for a type 2 diabetic too. It helps to lower your blood sugar. So that's why, like, before a workout, you're eating like a bagel with jelly and cream cheese.
I usually eat probably between 25 to 50 grams of carbs before a workout.
And I
don't take any insulin.
And you don't do any protein, fat, or fiber with it, really.
Yeah,
like
it's
cream
all,
cheese, but that's pretty much
no. It's all
carbs.
Typically carbs.
Yeah.
Which is I found, as long as I do it at the right amount of time before my workout, because like obviously you want to avoid a huge spike still. So like typically in the morning when I get up, I would say my blood sugar is usually around 130, 135. And so I'll eat my bagel, and then by the time I get to the gym, this might be a little too high sometimes, but I'm pushing 200 sometimes. But like as soon as I start working out, like dropping back down to baseline around 120-ish is where I usually finish after a workout.
Yeah.
So yeah, carbs beforehand, and I don't take any insulin because I've done it before where I take a little bit of insulin and it drops me way too down low even in my workout, because the insulin paired with the activity is going to drop at least my blood sugar levels down too far, and we've seen that multiple times before.
Yep.
So then after I work out, I'm always having...
Can I explain that really quick?
Yeah, go for it.
And so the reason for that is kind of what I was explaining with the muscle tissue, is just that your body has the higher capability to uptake that glucose into your muscle because your muscle is utilizing the stored glycogen. So when glucose is taken from the bloodstream and put into your muscle, it's stored as glycogen. Glycogen is then converted into ATP, which is energy that you use when you exercise. So when you're continually exercising and utilizing that glycogen, the glucose that you are eating is also going to then be utilized as energy because your muscle has the capability to uptake it. So that's why when Zach is exercising, even if he doesn't take insulin, he's noticing that he's still taking up that glucose and using it because his body is burning through the carbohydrates while it's exercising.
Yeah, and then post workout, I'm always having a protein shake paired with usually a fruit, so a carb source, and that keeps me at baseline. Like that doesn't affect my blood sugar that much, because usually the fruit that I'm having is like a That's It bar, which has like 13 grams of carbs in it, and that doesn't really do anything to me paired with the protein shake. So like I know that like post workout, like I don't have to worry about taking insulin because I know what I'm having, I know how it affects my blood sugar, and then hour or two later, I'll have breakfast where I'm having protein, carbs, fat, more carbs within a fruit. That's typically the structure of my breakfast. It's not the same food every time. I kind of go in cycles of what I want to eat, but like that same kind of balanced plate is usually what I'm having. So I know that like usually with breakfast, I'm taking roughly probably 4-ish units of insulin, and I know that my blood sugar is going to be stable with that. And then lunch, kind of the same kind of thing. A couple hours later, parent are having a protein, carb, fat kind of structured plate, a little bit of color. I know that honestly, depending on the day at lunch, again, probably 3 to 4 units of insulin. So it's like, so it's staying very consistent with these things so you know how it's going to affect your body every time. I think that's the biggest key for me. You know, that doesn't keep me from like every once in a while, like if the office or something has like snacks, like they bring in breakfast, something a little different, doesn't mean I don't go and get it.
Yeah.
I just know if I'm going to do that, I want to make sure that like, if it's like just donuts, that I'm still eating my protein from my breakfast with the donuts.
Yeah.
So just understanding how different, I guess, like carbs and fiber and fats and whatever else you're pairing together, how it affects your blood sugar, and knowing that pairing them together is going to have a much better effect on your blood sugar than just eating straight up carbs or whatnot. But the biggest thing for me is just consistency, and then coming home at dinner and having, I mean, obviously you cook most nights and you're cooking a protein, pairing it with some kind of carb, having fats, putting in color on your plate. So that's really what it comes down to, is just being consistent and knowing that like, as long as you're having balanced plates, like it's honestly an easy thing to manage. That doesn't make it like annoying. Yeah, it gets a little annoying to manage sometimes, but like it makes it easier knowing the structure of the way you eat every day.
Yeah.
And again, it can be very flexible too, though.
And I think another thing too, like Zach will also have, like if he has dessert, for example, at night, it's like he has that after he has dinner. So he's got protein, carbs, fat in his system, right after he has dinner. Or what else he'll sometimes do is like if he has a donut at breakfast, like especially on the weekends when he's actually home, if he has a donut at breakfast or if he has a dessert in the evening and we go for a walk, then he won't even have to take insulin. Now, that's not necessarily the case for everybody. Some people will still have to take insulin along with that. But I think it's because you, one, have muscle, and two, because you do manage your blood sugar so well that when you go walk, that once again helps with that uptake of glucose because your body is utilizing it. So like, for example, if he does want to have something and he doesn't want to pair it because he's not hungry, he'll be like, can we just go for a 10-minute walk, like after dinner or after breakfast, so that I can help to balance out my blood sugar. And then we'll go on a walk and immediately like his sugar will just kind of start to go down. So that's another thing too that I think works really well for you. But in terms of like power pack snacks and stuff that we have on hand, like stuff you eat a lot is like cheese sticks and that's it bars. We have chomp sticks for like a protein source. You do a lot of like pistachios as a fat and protein with that's it bars.
We do the cracker and cheese packs from Costco.
Yep, cracker and cheese packs are another really big one. Greek yogurt with some like granola or berries is another one. You used to do cottage cheese a lot. You don't do that as much anymore.
Yeah.
Chocolate milk is still, so as long as we get the lower sugar, so we do the Fairlife chocolate milk. You are drinking A&E, which shout out to my fellow Iowans, but that one is a little too high sugar for you.
That shit is crack, though.
It's so good, but I can't do it. And I also can't drink it because it's not lactose free. But so that's why we do the Fairlife now. It's higher protein and a little bit lower in the sugar, and there's no lactose in it. So I can drink it, and then also it's easier on Zach's blood sugar than the other types of chocolate milk. So those are some of the like biggest things I think that have really changed the game in terms of you balancing it, is just those power pack snacks and balanced plates and having those different pairings at all of them, which like Zach said, it does help that he has a dietitian as a wife. But I think that anybody can learn these things. It's just keep following me because I share examples and ideas all the time.
And that's what I would say too, is like, I really haven't learned any of this from not to say my diabetes educators haven't been good, because they have been in the capacity that they talk about. They do great.
Yeah.
But like everything I've learned about how to eat with this disease has come from you. And that includes literally going to your presentation at the library in Cedar Falls, what was that, a couple weeks ago? And like sitting through your presentation being like, because I'm a very visual learner. And guys, I don't get on TikTok a whole lot. I just don't. I will go like and watch my wife's videos, but like actually sitting in her presentation about how to balance or build balanced plates and getting the breakdown of every single part of that plate and how it interacts with each other, like that has stuck with me more than anything that any endocrinologists, or like, again, not to shit on diabetes educators, but you explain it so much more clearly.
I think the thing with like anyone in a hospital, I say this to any client who has had an experience with a dietitian in a hospital that wasn't necessarily what they were looking for. They're given a protocol that they follow, and that's unfortunately not their fault.
And it's usually pretty canned wording.
It's pretty, well, and it's also very like standard across, like you pretty much educate everyone the exact same way because you just simply don't have the time to educate them in a different capacity or a different way, which is ultimately why I wanted to go off on my own too, because I didn't like that. I wanted to be able to educate people the way that I educate people now, because I think another really big thing here is like, obviously, yes, it's very helpful for you as a type 1 diabetic, but blood sugar balance is beneficial to anyone. Like learning how to eat, once again, rather than how to diet is huge when it comes to learning and understanding nutrition and all of these different things. So this isn't something that's like just for Zach. This is something that, I mean, my presentation was not diabetes focused. Like that presentation was just for women at the Cedar Falls Library. It was talking about balanced eating and building balanced plates and power pack snacks. Like it was what I pretty much teach in my group coaching program, Nourish Without Numbers. It's what I teach to my one-on-one clients. It's like the basis of the education that I do.
And that's what I was kind of getting at with like the consistency thing, is like, when you understand how to eat, it helps you manage this disease so much better.
Yeah. I think it helps you like any chronic disease that you have, or just if you're trying to be a healthier individual, it's going to benefit you in a positive way.
And you'll notice that. But one thing I did want to touch on quick too was like talking about how like I'm consistent with these things. I do want to also talk about where I do struggle with some of these, like some of the food stuff. Is like sometimes I would say during the day, like I'm so consistent. I'm always in the routine of like when I'm eating, what I'm eating, pairing it with the correct things. Sometimes where I do struggle is at night, especially
garden gummies.
Garden gummies sometimes complain of this, but even just on a regular night, it's like I've always been a big snacker. Which has been a huge adjustment for me with type 1 diabetes. Is I do not snack as much anymore, but sometimes I can go through the day, eat consistently, eat my usual stuff, and it comes the night where I'll eat dinner, have dessert, and then like an hour later, I'm like, I'm still starving. I need more food. And then I can start eating a few things here and there and maybe not pairing them with the correct things just because like I want something quick to eat. I want to have something before I go to bed. But what can happen with those things is sometimes I'll estimate the correct amount of units of insulin to take, and it may not be enough or may be a little too much. So one thing where that can kind of mess me up a little bit is if I'm not taking enough insulin paired with my late night snacks, my levels are going to be high overnight for an extended period of time, which is not going to be good for me in the long term. So I did want to be kind of vulnerable in saying that I do struggle in that area a little bit still. I'm not perfect with my blood sugar balance, but that is one area I do still struggle with from time to time.
But you do a pretty good job with it for the most part.
No, I do. But I wanted to be like vulnerable and honest and say there is still areas where I even still struggle.
Well, I think that when it comes to just balanced eating in general, this is what I talk about why I like intuitive eating and like balanced eating so much.
You don't have to be perfect.
No, it's a practice. Yes. It's an evolution. It's never going to be something that like, it's not another diet. You can't do it right or wrong. It's a practice, and everything coming from it is a learning experience. And I think there's been a lot of learning experiences this past year when it comes to type 1 diabetes. But I think it's also like, not that I didn't eat balanced, quote unquote, before, but I think it's even transformed like a lot of the way that I educate and a lot of the way that I eat too, because I've seen like, I can see the direct correlation of how Zach's blood sugar is impacted by certain things, which has really given me the like, holy cow, like this, when we talk about everybody wanting this magic key and this magic pill that fixes it, like it's blood sugar balance, because it affects so many other things within your body. I mean, think about, like Zach said, he was waking up all the time in the middle of the night to pee. He was doing all of these like things, and that's because his blood sugar was so out of whack. Like, I think a lot of the times people don't know that blood sugar really does impact your body in so many different ways. It impacts your cortisol, so your stress hormone. It impacts your estrogen and progesterone. If you're a female, it impacts your testosterone. If you're a male, it impacts so many different systems in your body. So like, if you're trying to change anything when it comes to your diet, blood sugar balance is one of the best places to start, in my opinion. Do you have anything else you want to add?
Was that it for the topics?
Yeah, because we're at it, and we're also at an hour.
Well, hey, we're just good talkers. Like you said, we got good banter.
Yes.
Like, is this Love Island?
We haven't watched that in a long time.
I know.
Well, I think that that's going to do it for the episode today. I didn't have any coughing attacks, so that was good.
Good.
I had a cough drop beforehand.
Yeah,
It helped.
let us know some other good topics that we as a couple can touch on in the future, because I want to be on the pod more.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
I enjoy recording with you. It makes it a lot easier for me to have like someone to talk with rather than just talking to myself or the wall for a while.
Yep.
All right. Well, we'll call it there, people. Thank you so much, as always, for listening to the Simply Balanced podcast. I appreciate you. I love you. I love this community so much. And thank you for letting this be a part of my job and every other thing that I do be a part of my job. And as Zach said, I don't even think that I've mentioned this on the podcast, but we are posting these on YouTube. So you can see videos. We're just in my little home office. It's not quite a podcast recording studio yet, but maybe someday. And you can watch these on there. And I think we're going to try to up the YouTube content at some point later this year too. So what's it? Simply Healthy RD on YouTube. I should probably know that.
Simply Healthy RD. And then, yeah, you got right now, it's just the Simply Balanced podcast playlist. But
Sweet.
Like Taylor said, we're going to work on growing that here towards the end of the year and give you guys some more content to work with. So,
Yep.
Look forward to that. And then can I do a quick outro?
Sure.
BBL Drizzy.
Oh, dear Lord.
BBL Drizzy.
This is all I've heard for the last week.
Love you guys. Peace.
Bye, guys. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of Simply Balanced. Thank you so much for tuning in and sharing a part of your day with me. I hope you find inspiration in our discussion and feel more equipped to embrace the balanced girl aesthetic in your daily life. Remember, balance is a journey, not a destination. It's about finding what works for you in your unique way. As we part ways, I encourage you to reflect on one thing you learned today and how you can incorporate that into your life to create more balance. Don't forget to subscribe to Simply Balanced so you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed our time together, consider leaving a review or sharing the podcast with a friend. Your support means the world, and until next time, keep striving for balance, nourish your body and mind, and remember to cherish life's simple pleasures. This is Taylor Grasso signing off. Stay balanced and see you next episode.